And we are live on YouTube, and now I'm going to let everybody in, whoever's coming. Good evening, everyone. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We're just getting started. Welcome. Just open the doors. Takes a few minutes to let everybody in. You're just joining us. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. When we start Zoom, it takes a few minutes to let everybody in the door, so welcome. And we will get started in a few minutes. You're just joining us again. This is the Montgomery County Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Takes a few to let everybody in. Welcome, everybody. All right, we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get going. Welcome, everyone.
Hey Matt, I think the chat is disabled for attendees right now.
All right, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder, executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on fire safety and prevention in apartment communities. With me, as always, is Renters Alliance staff members Tim Huang, Pat Beckham, Emily Towie. Our treasurer of our board of directors, Josh Fisher, is also joining us. A couple things about the town hall. It is being recorded and it is live on YouTube right now. So if you miss anything and you want to watch it later or share it with your friends or neighbors, please do so. We are going to request that any questions or concerns be put in the chat. After our presentation tonight, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers on the presentation. And then after that, we'll be open to any questions or concerns that we can address having to do with renters' rights or issues in your apartment community. So with that, it is my pleasure and my honor to welcome to our Renter Town Hall once again. We had him last year, the former battalion chief for the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue, Mr. Jim Resnick. Chief Resnick, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Before I get started, I want to give a quick shout out and thank you to Matt and the rest of the staff and the volunteers and the people that make the Renters Alliance work. The work that you guys are doing year round to help out folks that make up so much of our community out here makes a huge difference, and we do appreciate it. So thank you all for what you guys are doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second to make that happen. I'm going to dive into a PowerPoint. We're going to hit a lot of information very, very quickly so we have time for Q&A. And then, of course, you guys have your normal business, which is, I'll say, almost as important as the stuff I'm going to talk about. But let me get started on that in just one sec.
I doubt anything will be more important than fire and safety rescue, God forbid if there's a fire. So you're at the top of the list tonight.
Thank you, Matt. So you guys should be seeing the PowerPoint now. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
And let me just go slideshow from the beginning. All right. So again, I'm Jim Resnick. I'm a retired Montgomery County firefighter and paramedic. I did 28 years of work for Montgomery County in that capacity. I retired a little more than 9 years ago, and right after I retired, I came back to the fire service here in Montgomery County as a contractor, and I run our Fire Safety for Older Adults program. It's kind of a unique program. I believe it's the only one of its kind in the nation, but as seniors, and I count myself among them, we have special needs and special issues when it comes to fires and fire safety. However, I talk about the whole broad range of fire safety kind of for everybody, regardless of age. So let's dive right into the information that I've got for you all this evening. If you hear only 3 things from what I'm talking about this evening in this presentation, understand and practice these 3 concepts here. Number 1, practice your fire escape plan. Have a fire escape plan. Know where you're going to go, when you're going to go there, how you're going to get there, and have a backup plan. What if plan A, as it were, is blocked by smoke, by fire, by something else that's going on that you're not going to be able to go through that plan A? Have a plan B. Practice that plan also. We'll get more into this in a few minutes. Ensure that you have working smoke and carbon monoxide alarms on every level of the home that you live in. If you're in a house, if you're in a townhouse, you need to have on multiple levels. Every single level needs to have those working alarms. They need to be less than 10 years old, and they need to be tested regularly. And then finally, sleep with your bedroom door closed. Closed doors absolutely save lives in the event of a fire. Do not fight a fire. God forbid there's a fire, just get out. Close the door as you leave and call 911. Again, we want people to be heroes, but this is the kind of hero that we want. Someone sleeping with their bedroom door closed, someone who gets out right away if there's a fire and calls 911. And if you can close doors as you leave, do that as long as it's not going to slow you down. Now, smoke alarms. I talked about having these working smoke and carbon monoxide alarms throughout our homes. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that they work. When I put on a seatbelt, I know it's going to work because I hear that click. Similarly, I want to hear my smoke alarm work. I need to make sure that this thing is going to save my life in the event of a fire. And just like hearing a click, I've got to hear my smoke alarm operate when I push that test button. You don't have to climb up on a ladder. We don't want you getting up on a chair or doing anything unsafe. From the ground, you can use a yardstick, a swifter, a broom with a long handle, something like that. And like it shows in the picture here of the woman testing her smoke alarm, while you're on solid ground, you can test your smoke alarms. Some of them you have to push and hold the button in for a few seconds. Some of them you just push it and release and it will run through the test cycle. but you're not going to know that they work unless you test them. Have a reasonable and realistic fire escape plan for you, for everyone else that lives with you, whether they have 2 legs or 4 legs. Include your pets into your fire escape plans. Your fire escape plan, as it says, should be based on your personal situation. What kind of a residence do you live in? What kind of fire protection features are there in that place? And what types of abilities or disabilities you or anyone else that you're living with has? And think about things like their age, like their physical and cognitive conditions, sensory and mobility statuses, and so on. We could be talking about someone who's very old. We could be talking about someone who's very young. In either case, they may not be able to care for themselves completely, or someone in the middle ages who has physical, cognitive, or other types of situations. But those need to be included into your fire escape plans. The good news is I have a video to show you. The bad news is the video is not running correctly on this PowerPoint. So instead, I'm going to tell you all that you can go to YouTube. And if you type in the search bar in YouTube, FSRI, that stands for the Fire Safety Research Institute, and then Fire Escape. So FSRI, Fire Escape. They have one that you see on your screen right here, which is how to escape from a high-rise fire. And the second one is planning your escape from a one-story home. FSRI, who we partner with on a lot of things, is working on other videos. Each of these videos is only about 4 or 5 minutes long, but it's the best 4 or 5 minutes you could ever spend. It can save your life, and it's not just watching the video, it's also then practicing your plan, and it doesn't take a lot to do that. Give me 1 second while I switch to the next slide, hopefully. Okay. Actually, here I've put in the links for those YouTube videos so you can follow these on your own, but they are absolutely worthwhile. I cannot stress that enough. And also, this PowerPoint will be shared with everyone. So if you weren't able to get down that long URL that was shown there, you'll have a chance to get a hold of this PowerPoint. So the fire escape plans for everyone should be multiple plans. Plan A, Plan B, and maybe even a Plan C, okay? Plan A is the best plan of all. Get out using your primary exit and call 911. Let's take a look at more about Plan A. Immediately, if you're aware that there might be a fire, get out and then call 911. Now, we might be aware that there's a fire because the fire alarm is going off. We might be aware because our smoke alarms in our own apartment or our own home are going off. We might be aware because someone yelled fire. We might be aware because we smell smoke or see fire. However you know about a fire, the safest place to be is outside of the building if you can get out and get out quickly. Use your primary exit. For those of you that live in a tall building, an apartment building, someplace like that, you should have more than one exit on every floor. So kind of like what they say on the airplane, don't just look for the closest exit, look for the closest 2 exits because the first one might not be usable or accessible to you. So always have that backup plan. If you were to leave your apartment or leave your bedroom and there's smoke out there, then you have a decision point. Should I proceed through the smoke or not? The thing that we tell folks is generally if you can see through the smoke, then you're probably safe to proceed. But if the smoke is so thick that you cannot see through the smoke, then turn around, kind of like with what they say about not drowning in your car. Turn around, don't drown. Turn around and consider Plan B. If possible, as you're going out, pull doors shut as long as it doesn't slow you down, and go to your planned and designated meeting place, a place where you've already said, this is where I'm going to go if there's an emergency. It could be the parking lot, it could be the front yard, it could be a particular tree, the mailbox. I don't care where it is, as long as you and the people who you care about and that you're responsible for know where that place is. And then once you get out, stay out. Never, ever, ever try to get back into a building that might be on fire. Get out and stay out. If you forgot to bring your phone, tell someone else to call 911. Bang on someone else's door. Come up with another way to deal with that. Plan B is another reasonable fire escape plan. Use a secondary exit to get out. That secondary exit might be another set of stairs if you're in a high-rise building. But if you're in a house, this might mean you got to think about going out of a window if it's not going to be a fatal jump or fall or anything like that. Remember that putting closed doors between you and where the smoke, the heat, the fire are can be an absolute lifesaver. If you're unable to get out using plan A or plan B, so go to plan C. So plan C gets a little bit more into that closed door, okay? If you can't get out for any reason, the more closed doors that you can put between yourself and where the fire is can provide incredible amounts of valuable time, like 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. And that might be 10 or 15 or 20 minutes per door. So if I can get 2 closed doors between me and the bad stuff, I have an even better chance of surviving this. If you're unable to get out, once you're in that safe location behind the closed doors, call 911 and tell them exactly where you are. Not just the address and the apartment number, but where you are inside that apartment. I'm in the back bedroom, which is all the way down the hall to the right. Or I'm in the master bathroom. You can get to that by going through the master bedroom, which is located to the left, to the right, straight ahead, whatever. Listen to the questions and to the instructions from the 911 call taker. Okay. It's so important that you follow their line of questioning and their answers. How about going out the window? If you can see this PowerPoint, you understand one of the reasons going out a window is not a great idea. This is generally a lousy plan. If you're in a high building, if you're in a tall building, then it's just not a reasonable option and it's not even worth thinking about. There's the possibility of serious injuries or death if you were to go out of a tall building or even out of a second story of a house. What you want to do if you're thinking I might have to go out this window is number one, keep the door closed. Give yourself that additional time. The next thing is if you have an opportunity to be strategic, do so. The lower the window, the lower the height, or the lower the distance that you would have to jump, and a softer landing area, those are going to be the primary things that can help make a difference. I'll use the example of my house. Out of one of my windows, it's about from my master bedroom, it's about 15 feet down to the driveway. The other window, it's about 8 feet down to some bushes. It doesn't take a genius to go the 8 foot onto the bushes. Sounds like the much better option. The next thing, if you're thinking about going out of a window, is do not break the glass. Broken glass can kill people. Open the window. Last thing is yell before you jump. Someone might have a ladder for you. Now, what if you're in a building that has a balcony? Okay. Should you go on the balcony or not? My answer is it depends. Okay. I don't know where the fire is. If I'm in apartment 504 and the fire happens to be in apartment 404, if I open my balcony door and go out onto my balcony, I'm going right into where the smoke and the heat and the fire are. I'm going to make things worse. I would have been better off staying in my apartment if I can't get out and keeping those doors and windows shut. So every situation is unique, every situation is different, but going to the balcony generally is not a great answer. It might be okay, it might not. And if you go to the balcony, bring a phone with you and close the balcony door. You don't want to give a fire additional oxygen, additional air. And generally, for going out the window, that's not an option in a high-rise or tall building. More about keeping your bedroom door closed. This is a screenshot from one of those videos that I mentioned that UL has put together. And these are two adjacent rooms that they had a fire that was set purposely for training and educational purposes. They put the fire out and then they dropped the outside wall. And you can see the difference between the closed door and the open door. Now, even the closed door, there is some smoke staining around the top edge of the door, but that is a room which was absolutely survivable. The room on the right, the temperature after about 5 minutes into the fire was over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. No one can survive that. That's the difference a door can make. All right, who's responsible for what if you are a renter? The property owner or the landlord is responsible for ensuring that you have the right stuff according to the fire code and or the housing code by what we call the authority having jurisdiction. So if you're in a high-rise rental building, you're in an apartment building that's a high-rise, parts of that fall under the Montgomery County Fire Marshal's office, and that would be the common areas. That would be the hallways, the lobby, those types of places. Individual apartments, you fall under the authority of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. So it's all kind of what we're talking about in a particular building. But you as the tenant are responsible for being familiar with the alarms and testing those alarms to ensure that they work. You're responsible for timely notification to the responsible party, which usually means either the landlord or the maintenance staff or whatever, using the proper means for notifying them if there's a problem. So if I have a smoke alarm in my apartment that does not work, and as I'm going down the hall, I bump into the maintenance guy and I go, hey, my smoke alarm in apartment 999 is not working. That is not the appropriate way to notify. Use your online forms, use your paper forms, use the phone number, use whatever the normal proper means is of notifying them of the problem. And finally, at the bottom of this slide, there's a note that says that the tenant should not test a monitored alarm system. So anything that's on a monitored system, whether it's the fire alarm pull stations, or perhaps maybe I'm renting a house and the alarms in the house are attached to an ADT fire alarm system or something like that. I should not test those alarms because there's a lot of things about that. That's the best way to describe that. And one more note, if you are a renter, please, please, please maintain effective renter's insurance. I say that because one of my jobs over the years was I ran the Montgomery County Department, or it was the Office of Emergency Management at the time. Now it's Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And I can't tell you how many situations we would run into every single year where we had renters who did not have any insurance or enough insurance for the disasters, either small or large, that they ran into. So I really have to push that point.
Jim,
Fire
if I could just
prevention.
jump in quick on that particular point, since we saw this at Arrive Silver Spring. If your landlord offers you insurance through your lease, please make sure that it includes the kind of benefits that protect your own belongings. It's one thing if they say this is what will satisfy your lease requirement to have insurance that protects the landlord, but you have to make sure that it's the kind of insurance that protects your belongings and provides for displacement insurance in case you have to go to a hotel or something. We have seen this. We saw this at Arrive Silver Spring, where tenants thought that they had insurance, but they did not. So please check that. If you have any doubts, we can certainly help you. But just because you sign on to the landlord's insurance and pay a fee for that doesn't necessarily mean that you have insurance that protects your own property.
That's so important. Thank you, Matt. And if it's in big, bold letters in red in the middle of one of my slides, you know it's important. Here's some other important stuff. Fire prevention. If we can keep a fire from happening in the first place, then we don't need plan A, plan B, plan C, but we still have to have those so we're ready. So when it comes to fire prevention, the first thing I want to mention is a new and emerging problem. And this is a huge problem. We're not just seeing it here in Montgomery County. All you got to do is turn on the news or read papers or anything like that from anywhere, especially New York City. Rechargeable batteries are everywhere in our lives. My cell phone, my laptop, my newly purchased Dyson cordless vacuum cleaner. I have an electronic bike. I got a dust bus. These are the kinds of things that are in so many of our lives. So the first thing is, once you finish reading your insurance coverage to make sure it's correct, like Matt just said, the next thing to do is to actually read the darned owner's manuals. They have incredibly important safety information and recommendations, and you need to follow those. Pay attention to how your devices are charging and how they're operating. If it's making weird noises, if it's acting unusual, pay attention to that. And if it's not acting right, like it says a couple of bullets down, unplug it, turn it off, get it fixed, or get rid of it. But do not use it. We just had a fire yesterday up in Germantown, and I think it was a cell phone, and it started making weird noises, and then it started making sounds like it was off gassing. And the woman, fortunately, she did get it out of her apartment. Sadly, she did not protect herself and she did suffer burns to her hand. She got it outside of the building and covered it up somehow. And then the fire department came. They handled it with the hazmat team, but sadly, she did have some burns to her hand. So you have to take care of yourself. Never charge any of these devices in a place where it could block your exit, especially things like e-bikes or e-scooters. People tend to just roll them right in the door of their home or their apartment, and that's where they're going to charge them. The problem is, if there is a fire with this stuff, there's your means of getting out, and that's not a good thing. Do not ever charge any of these rechargeable devices in direct sunlight. The extra energy from the sun can be enough to make the batteries overheat, explode, catch on fire, and bad things happen. And never cover these devices while they're charging with anything like blankets or papers or anything like that. This is a tweet that was just sent out by Montgomery County Fire Rescue from a couple of days ago. The picture that you see is not a fire from a couple of days ago. This is actually from a fire that we went to a couple of years ago, but it shows what happened. Someone had a cell phone on their bed during the night. They put the pillow, not probably while they were asleep, they just flipped the pillow over on top of the phone that was charging. It overheated. It started to catch the sheets, the mattress, and the pillowcase on fire. In this particular case, the person was not injured, but it was a miracle that it was not worse. So be careful about how you use these things. Other basic fire prevention: never leave cooking unattended. That is still the number one cause of fires that we see in Montgomery County. Never, ever, ever leave candles or incense unattended. If you're leaving the room, blow it out, put it in water. I'm not a real big fan of candles, period, except for the battery operated electric candles, which don't have a flame. We wish that people did not smoke, and I'm not just talking cigarettes. I'm talking anything that people smoke. But if they do, they've got to smoke responsibly. Okay, which that smoking responsibly includes never, ever, ever smoking around medical oxygen. From Montgomery County Fire, we have a lot of information out there. I'll show you the website in a couple of minutes on a lot of the things that we're seeing causing fires and some tips about what you can do to reduce the chance of having these fires, whether it's electrical, whether it's people putting their fireplace ashes or grill ashes in the wrong place, having combustibles too close to space heaters, more about the candles, like I said before, things about dryer fires, and it goes on and on. We have a lot of really good information. when it comes to fire prevention and electrical problems, we want to make sure we never overload electrical outlets. We don't want cords underneath rugs or anything like that. And periodically, we want to take a look at our electrical cords. And if they are cracked or frayed, we throw it out. We don't try to jerry rig these things. Just throw them out and get a replacement as recommended by the manufacturer. Daisy chains are a real big problem where we have people who plug in one power strip or surge protector, and then to try to squeeze out a little more electricity, they plug another surge protector into that first one. That can overload your electrical system and it causes a lot of fires. So just do not do a daisy chain. Finally, carbon monoxide. If you are a renter, whether you're in a place that has the normal sources for carbon monoxide, like natural gas or propane or wood burning, any of these types of things, even if you have an all electric home with no garage and no fireplace, if you are a renter, you are supposed to have a carbon monoxide alarm on every level of your home. And of course, if you do have any of those things, natural gas appliances, propane appliances, an attached garage, a fireplace, a wood stove, anything like that, it's imperative that you have a working carbon monoxide alarm on each floor of your home. That's our website is MCFRS, stands for Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service. So it's mcfrs.org/mcsafe. You can call 311 for more information. And there's my name and my email address if you have any questions or issues that I can help you with. So that kind of ends my PowerPoint, and I'll take, well, Matt, I'm passing the torch back to you.
Thank you. I thought you were going to get under your desk and hide. It seemed like you were
No, I'm not that kind of guy.
ducking from questions, literally. Here we go. I have a question. One of the things we see increasingly in apartment communities across Montgomery County are senior citizens and the disabled who are living on upper floors. We know that during a fire and during when the fire alarm is pulled, that the elevators will stop running. And, obviously, if you're on the upper floors, there's no way for someone who's a senior citizen who can't do 15 floors or 5 floors or 3 floors, or someone who's in a wheelchair or a walker. How are they supposed to get out? And what would you recommend, or does the fire department have any kind of process for people in that situation to alert them about their location in advance?
You just asked a whole lot right there. So one of the slides that I had up was about Plan C. And if you can see what it says for Plan C at the first kind of a bullet point, it says, if you cannot get out for any reason, and that reason could be that I went and I opened my apartment door and there was smoke or heat in the hallway, I'm going to close that door. It could be that I open the door to exit and there's a crazy person in the hallway there, and I'm going, I'm not engaging with that person. I'm going to close my door. Or it could be I'm on an upper floor and I have a mobility issue. I use a wheelchair, a walker, a cane, whatever's going on, and I'm unable to get out of my apartment. Then the answer is do what Plan C says, which is to get as far away from any smoke or fire as you can. So if there was smoke in the hallway, I'm not only going to close my apartment door, but I'm going to retreat into my bedroom if I have that bedroom door, and I'm going to close that. I've now doubled my protection. And once you're in a safer place, now I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to call 911. Do not call the front desk. Do not call the concierge. Do not call maintenance. Do not call a friend unless your friend is at the 911 center. Call 911, tell them exactly where you are, and not the address, the apartment number, if that's part of it, and where in your home or your apartment you are, and that you cannot get out. That information, real time, is what we need. People talk about, well, should the front desk have a list? Should the fire department maintain a list? That list does us no good unless it's actually at that moment that we know you're there. Because if you're at the grocery store, the movies, visiting a friend, wherever, okay, then we're going to an apartment which is vacant, and we're taking our very, very stressed resources and tying them up there. So real time, call 911. Now, you're saying that there's huge buildings in Montgomery County, some of which have 1,000 apartments or more. I'm talking if you are in a situation where you cannot get out for any reason at all, you call 911. You might get put on hold. You might hear that recording going, all operators are busy, stay on the line. They mean that, because if you hang up and try again, you're at the back of the line. Be patient, and that's why you want to think about this before an emergency happens. That's kind of a long answer, Matt, but that's what I got for you.
So real time versus, I mean, I'm assuming that I still think it's a good idea for property management to have an idea of who in the building has whatever issues, but I also get the limited resources in an emergency. And so being accurate in directing those resources in real time makes a whole lot of sense. But back to sort of overlapping here, the fire safety plan. We have apartment communities where they complain, particularly senior communities, that there's been no fire drill in years, if ever. That the alarm systems are going off all the time when there's no fire. What should tenants do in situations where they feel that there really isn't a fire safety plan, where there isn't a whole lot of drills going on, if any, and where they're seeing mechanical problems with the alarms that are creating, unfortunately, a cry wolf scenario?
All right, great questions all. The short answer is every alarm means that there might be a fire, and we need to react appropriately every single time. Now, I'm aware, as you are, of a lot of places, and there's certain properties in particular where there's documented cases of huge numbers of bored kids or other people who are pulling fire alarms and doing things like that. It's a huge and ongoing problem. I can tell you that from what I'm aware of, the highest levels of the county government, the fire department, the fire marshal's office, which is part of Department of Permitting Services, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and others are looking into what they can do about those situations. But we still have to act like it's a real fire every time, which means if you have the ability to get out, get out. If you don't have the ability to get out, get to a safe location where there's no smoke or fire and call 911. There was another part of your question, and I'm sorry, I forgot.
Drills.
Thank you. Fire drills. There is no requirement in any fire code to have fire drills in independent living residences. It's just not there. Okay. In schools, there's a requirement. In healthcare facilities, there's a requirement. In jails, there's a requirement, but not in independent living homes. So my answer to people is, you want a fire drill? Great. The first thing is, the next time you're leaving your home or your apartment, that's your fire drill. Okay. So let's pretend the elevators aren't working and there's smoke in the stairwell that's closest to you. So use the other stairwell. You have just had yourself a fire drill. You've thought through, here's where I'm going to go, here's what I'm going to take with me, and that's your fire drill. Also, any of these buildings, at least once a year, and depending on the types of systems they have, sometimes it's as many as 4 times a year, are going to have a test of the fire alarm system. That's required by the fire marshal. So you get a notice. It's usually posted in the elevator. Sometimes they slip it under the door. They send emails and they say, next Thursday at 2 p.m., we're going to be testing the fire alarms. You can disregard the fire alarms. You know what my answer is? If I happen to be home at 2 p.m. next Thursday, then I'm going to have a fire drill. When the fire alarm goes off, I'm going to practice my plan. So we don't have to have a formal fire drill. And the last part is you mentioned that people say, well, the fire alarm went off, but there was no fire. I don't know if people were expecting to see the whole place burn to the ground, but sometimes there is either a small fire or it was a fire that was contained quickly, or there were other circumstances, like I burned the food on my stovetop, didn't have a fire, but I created a bunch of smoke and I opened the door from my apartment to the hallway. When I have that smoke in my apartment and my smoke alarm in my apartment is sounding, that's for me. That's not for the whole building. But if I then open the door from my apartment to the hall and out in the hallway, the smoke detector there catches the smoke, now it's everyone's issue because that smoke detector is attached to the building's fire alarm. Fire alarm goes off because it thinks there might be a fire based upon the circumstances. We as human beings need to react to that accordingly.
Chief, who enacts fire code legislation? Is that something that the fire marshal recommends, or is that a state legislative body or the county?
There's a whole lot in there. There are certain rules, laws, ordinances, which are state mandated, and then the county can have either the same or stricter. And then each of the local jurisdictions, like the city of Gaithersburg, the city of Tacoma Park, the city of Rockville, they can even increase over the counties. Most of what we're talking about, though, tends to be on the level of the state. And in particular, and I'm guessing, Matt, that we're going towards the fire sprinkler mandate. Is that where you're going with this?
Comes to the reverse there. I was thinking two things. One was the sprinkler thing, which is a whole other basket of issues. But I am particularly interested in your opinion on whether there ought to be once a year or once every 2 years a building-wide fire drill. As you say, schools, prisons, some of our apartment communities are very large and very diverse, and the fire prevention infrastructure, such as having a fire captain on each floor, somebody who knows on each floor where senior citizens or the disabled might be, having some kind of awareness infrastructure as part of the drill. But if it's not required, we're seeing whole communities that are really almost completely unprepared beyond the fire alarm going off.
And it is a struggle. I'll tell you that so X apartment community, X high-rise community, whatever happens to be, says we're going to do a fire drill, next Thursday or something like that. People are at work, people are at school, people are at the doctor's office, people are shopping. Some people we know physically can't go down the stairs. So the expectation that the fire drill is going to, the alarm's going to be pulled and we're going to have people lining up outside is just not a reality. And my experience with working with some communities who have tried it is it's incredibly, for the planners and all, disappointing when less than 10% of their building is outside for this announced fire drill. So because there's no requirement to get out if we know it's a fire drill, people say, I'm not participating. There's a zillion reasons. Some people are working shift work, and during the day, that's their time to sleep. So they're not going to get out. And again, all of this is to say, my personal opinion, my experience is the fire drills are not going to get the results that people hope that they're going to get.
Well,
hold on one second.
Sorry.
But treating every alarm like it's the real thing, that's your fire drill.
Mm-hmm. Well, we deal with renter outreach and education, and we organize tenants associations, and we never expect to get 100% or even 50% of a building completely organized. It's always a fraction, but that fraction also becomes informed and can help operate, and help a whole community in certain situations. So we wouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. But the other is another question in addition to that is there a requirement, or should there be a requirement that every property management company or landlord at least have a written fire safety plan that tenants could access, knowing what they're supposed to do? Is that something that is expected to be available for all tenants, or is this just based on whether the property management or landlord is making good practice?
I don't believe that there is a requirement. And again, that would fall somewhere between the fire marshal and Department of Housing and Community Affairs. And I'm not quite sure where that would fall, but I'm not aware of either of those groups or those departments having a mandate for having a fire plan. It's very, very good practice. I would think that the insurer of the building would want to see that you've got that. And even with that, again, I think that the reality is that there's very, very low compliance with people actually reading that and understanding that. That's kind of why, if you think about my presentation, I went back to the basics. Okay, have your smoke alarms, have a plan to get out, know about closed doors, and just do that. And I hate to say it's kind of everyone for themselves, but it should be everyone for themselves. The floor captain idea that you had mentioned before, my experience, including about 14, 15, 16 years as a chief officer, whether it was paid or volunteer, was that the places I ever went to that had a floor captain, the captain was away from the building when the fire happened, and the backup captain was away, and it just was not a reliable system. Yes.
Excuse me. I'm just want to go back to the sprinkler system. I know some of the older buildings in Montgomery County don't have sprinkler systems, and I understand that they have what I think is a outrageous amount of time to have them implemented in the buildings. I was just wondering if you had heard, given the fires we've had recently, has any legislation, or have you heard of any, I guess, information about changing that time limit? I believe is it 30 years they have to
10 years. 10
okay.
years. So the 30 that you probably heard was 2033.
Okay.
So it's 10 years. Now we're talking about major cost. We're talking about a huge process with planning it and permitting it and executing it and so on. We have 75, I believe, 75 high-rise residential buildings in Montgomery County that were built before 1974 that therefore do not have fire sprinkler systems. And, you know, all I got to do is rattle off a couple of names of a couple of buildings, and I can tell you personally where there have been major fires at these buildings. It's a serious situation, but it's not a cheap situation either. And I understand that. But what I also understand, I'm still an active volunteer firefighter. And the best way I can put it is my butt is the one who's got to climb 20 stories in some of these buildings or more with all of our gear and stuff like that to put out a fire. It's not going to happen quickly. And you'll never, ever convince me or any other firefighter that not having sprinklers is acceptable. But there's realities involved with this, including financial and other realities. So I'm thrilled that we do have that mandate. I hope not to be fighting fires in another 10 years or so, but for the next generation and the generation after that for firefighters. And of course, that speaks nothing of what's going on with the residents, especially those that are most vulnerable.
Emily or Tim, do we have any other questions from the chat?
There was a question about a fire alarm not going off in the entire building, only going off in the bottom 4 floors, and they were on the 8th floor. And they were just wondering, like, who makes the decision about what floors an alarm's going off on?
So what I'll describe as newer high-rise residential buildings, and I'm going to pull a year out of the sky, and this might not be exactly correct, but buildings that were built, high-rise residentials that were built, I'll say after the mid to late 1990s, that have a full high-rise package, and there's a lot that goes into that. I could spend a couple of hours describing what that means, but it's where they have fire sprinklers everywhere, they have pressurized stairwells, there's dampers in the heating and air conditioning ducts, there's all kinds of protections there. Those buildings, the fire alarm will only activate in the event of a sprinkler activation, a fire alarm pull station, a smoke detector in a common area. The fire alarm will only activate on 3 floors, the affected floor, 1 floor above, and 1 floor below. So in that type of a scenario where, let's say there's smoke in the hallway on the 7th floor, the only floors that are going to be alerted are 6, 7, and 8 because of all the protections in that building. Another building that might look very similar on the outside that does not have fire sprinklers, that does not have that full high-rise package, that same scenario, a fire alarm pull station, smoke in the hallway, something along those lines, will result in the entire high-rise building being alerted. That's how these systems are supposed to work. There may be a little bit in between out there. I'll suggest if you have a specific date, address, or something like that, you can do a couple of things. You can send me an email and I'll forward it to the fire marshal's office, or you can call 311 and ask to speak to someone from the fire marshal's office, and you can report it that way if you think that there's a chance that it was not working properly.
Hey, Jim, do the buildings have fire extinguishers placed in different areas, or?
So many
And-
many residential buildings are required to have fire extinguishers, but not all buildings. I think when you're talking about high rises, there is the requirement. If you're talking garden apartments, some of them do have fire extinguishers and some don't. And there's a variety of reasons why they might or might not. You'll notice that when I was talking about Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, there was nothing in there about fighting fires. And in fact, if you remember one of the very first slides that I put up, it said something about being a hero, and being a hero does not include fighting the fire. We do not want people to engage with fire. It's a bad outcome. Okay. Now, Pat, I know that we were talking earlier about the fact that you worked in a healthcare setting, and through that, you had hands-on practical training with a fire extinguisher. I'm going to put you in like the 1% of people who know what a fire extinguisher is. They've used it, they've practiced with it, and so on. You're a different animal than most of the people out there. My experience anecdotally, and I can also go to National Fire Protection Association data, says that when people engage with the fire, the outcome is usually much worse. People get overcome with smoke, they get burned and injured, they delay calling 911, which means the fire has even more of a chance to grow before the fire department is alerted. All of these are bad outcomes. We want people to leave, close doors as they can, call 911 from outside.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience, gang? Concerns?
No.
There's a question that just came in. Let's see. They asked, why is there no protection in Montgomery County regarding secondhand smoke in residential multi-apartment units?
That may not be in your bailiwick.
Any
Chief.
kind of smoking restrictions are they're the purview of the Department of Health and Human Services in Montgomery County, and I really don't know what they can do or what they have in terms of enforcement and education and things like that. But that would be a question for HHS.
Correct. Just what we know about it is that if your building is a smoking permitted building, and it should say so in your lease, then, people are allowed to smoke. You can ask that if smoke is going into the hallways and the common areas, you can ask your property management to see that if you can identify where it's coming from, that be sealed in the apartment where it's coming from. You can also ask that your own apartment be sealed so that smoke is not entering your apartment where that's possible. But before you move into an apartment building, if you're highly sensitive to smoke, you should see whether or not it is a smoke-free environment or whether smoking is permitted. And of course, now not only do we have cigarettes, but we have marijuana and incense, excuse me.
Not incest.
And one and the same, perhaps for some people, it is smoky, and people are affected by it. And so if you're sensitive to it, it is something you need to look into when you move into a place, but it can be mitigated. So, something we can help you with if there's a real problem there. Now, if somebody is smoking in a non-smoking building, then it's a little bit complicated, but it can be dealt with by having yourself identify where the smoke is coming from and getting the property management to deal with that effectively. But it is a little bit difficult to deal with these situations. We've seen it quite frequently. And increasingly too, now that marijuana is legal. So not only do we get the smoke as a danger, but we get the smell that people don't like either. Anything else out there? Chief Resnick, if an apartment community wanted to have you come to speak to the Tenants Association meeting, is that something that you or your office takes care of and is able to do?
Absolutely, positively, yes. And I'm going to go back to share my screen for 1 second. That's how you figure that out. You can either look on our website and get some information that way. You can call 311 and ask about having someone from the fire department come to your neighborhood and provide a fire safety education program, or you can email me.
Chief, we had one more question about someone asked in the chat about landlords' responsibility to provide a fire extinguisher. Could you touch on that a little bit?
So, as I understand, and I would have to dig into the fire safety code and the housing code to figure this out. If you are in a high-rise residential building, it is required to have a certain number of fire extinguishers or fire extinguishers every so many feet in the hallway or other types of requirements like that. I'm not aware of any requirements in any jurisdiction in Montgomery County that say that the landlord has to provide a fire extinguisher inside the individual apartments. And I'll go back again. Let me describe it to you this way. I practice what I preach. In my home, I do not have any fire extinguishers. When I'm at home, I'm not ready to fight a fire. My clothing is flammable. My skin is not protected. My lungs are not protected. I have no business being anywhere near a fire. So what I do is what I've told you all to do, which is to get out. Now, when I go to the fire station, which I'm still an active volunteer firefighter, when I'm there, mentally, I'm expecting I'm going to go to a fire. Physically, I'm prepared. I stretch, I do whatever kind of calisthenics, working out, and so on. I wear firefighting gear, which is going to provide a level of protection. Every inch of my skin is protected. I bring in my own clean breathing air with me. I bring a helmet because things can fall down. So I'm protected that way, and it's a different environment. I don't know that that really addresses the question, but I hope it does. Don't mess with fire extinguishers. Get out. Call 911.
Thank you.
Point made. Any other questions for Chief Resnick?
I'm going to give one last shameless plug if I can.
Please plug away.
On our website, you see that there's all kinds of information. If you saw what I had up there in terms of that cover page for the MCFRS page, but we have all kinds of brochures, handouts, and so on lots and lots of timely topics, things like e-bikes and e-scooters, electrical safety, cooking safety, heating safety, fire safety, things like that. I've been to a couple of communities recently where I saw that they had posted these in the front of every building or in the elevators or other things like that. If you want some of that material, we need our minions out there. We need people to push these messages of fire prevention and fire safety. If you send me an email and say, hey, Jim, I'd love to have some handouts that I can post around about heating safety or e-bikes or whatever, give me a shout.
Much appreciated. We will do our best to get the information, most important, valuable information you've given us tonight to our database and wherever we go as part of what we tell renters that they need to know. And we're particularly grateful for your presence here tonight. And of course, we honor and are grateful for your service to Montgomery County. We will have you back again. Unfortunately, fire safety is something that has to be repeated over and over and over again because, unfortunately, fires are not infrequent.
Yep.
And so we very much appreciate your presence here, Chief Resnick, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you again for having me. And again, I appreciate all that you guys are doing. Have a
Thanks.
great night. Stay safe. Happy holidays coming up. And enjoy the weather before it turns.
And by the way, please come as our special guest to our building community celebration December 1st. We'll send you an invite. Nothing to do except enjoy yourself.
Thank you for the nice offer. I'll try to take you up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Good
right.
night.
Let me address a couple other things if there's nothing else in the chat that we have to address right now. A couple things. As I just mentioned, we'll have our annual building community celebration on December 1st from 6:30 to 8 p.m. in downtown Silver Spring. If you're on this Renter Town Hall, then you will receive our newsletter, which has the invitation in the newsletter. So mark it down. Tons of fun. We're going to be honoring the county executive, county council members, Jawando and Mink, as well as renter activists and leaders and community leaders who helped advance rent stabilization in Montgomery County. And on that point, rent stabilization bill that we passed a few months ago has now come into has reached the 90-day mark, but has yet to come into an enforcement effect. They are still working on the regulations that need to be developed as part of that legislation. We've had the Director of Housing, Scott Bruton, on our call before to discuss the development of those regulations. We will have him back, as well as Nicole Katravanos, the manager of the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, to give us an update on where those regulations are headed. I know there's a lot of confusion out there. People think that you're protected by rent stabilization now, and not yet. The other thing is that the rent stabilization bill, while we are very pleased that the council was talking about it and enacted something, it is still very modest. It has when it comes into an enforcement effect, it will have a 6% rent increase cap. That's still a lot for a lot of people. It's not what we wanted. We wanted something much lower than that. For buildings that have built in the last 23 years, if it was built 22 years ago, you've got one more year where the building is exempt no matter when the legislation comes into effect. If you were built this year, you have 23 years before that building will be covered by the rent stabilization legislation. If you live in a unit that is owned by a landlord who only owns 1 or 2 units, you're exempted. Council member Don Lutke was one who pushed those amendments. We opposed them, but they passed. So the legislation is not as strong as we would like. We require that renters be active. We hope that one day we'll be able to strengthen this legislation. But in the meantime, I want to make sure that expectations are correct, but also to acknowledge, because we've been doing this a long time. We started this in 2007. There was a time when we would talk rent stabilization and literally some of our elected officials would laugh in our face. Now, We've gotten to a point where they're talking about it, they passed something, and it is progress, but we must all agree it's not yet mission accomplished. And for fun, on November 18th, Saturday, November 18th, the Renters Alliance will again be in the Silver Spring Thanksgiving Day Parade. We have a float. We have a lot of people on that float, but if you really want to join us and be on the float, you have to stand on the back of the truck. We have donuts and coffee. It'll be a good time, but you got to be able to be on there for a few hours. And last year it was really cold. So, if you want to bundle up and you can get on the back of a truck and hold up signs that say renters have rights and housing is a right and rent stabilization is important and people should not be evicted without a good reason, then let us know and we'll see if we've got room on the truck. We'd love to have you. It'll be nothing but fun. But we're almost at capacity, but I do want to alert you. And if you can't join us on the truck, at least come to the parade and give us a cheer when we go by. So is there anything else, staff, that we need to address that has come up in the chat?
Don't think so.
Okay, then also last thing, we are in the community everywhere where we can be. We don't have the capacity to be everywhere all at once, but we are in an expanded capacity, unprecedented capacity this year. And we are going door to door in as many buildings in Montgomery County as we can to pass out literature of invitations to these town halls, but also encouraging tenants to invite us to come to your building community to explain your rights and responsibilities, the law, to address issues in your building, and to form tenants associations. There is nothing, in our view, more valuable than tenants acting collectively to pursue their rights or required or entitled services and quality of life in your building. So we are available to do that. The Renters Alliance is the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, education, organizing, and advocacy, and we are here to help. There's no charge, so we're free, so to speak. So please reach out to us. We would love to have you. And for God's sakes, where our renters have rights and renters vote button, if you're out there in the parade. If you need one, let us know. We'll send you one of those too. And again, also, we do have COVID test kits. If you can't get them yourself, we'd be happy to deliver them to you along with masks. So COVID is still out there, even though you should all be vaccinated, but we need to protect ourselves. This thing is not going away, probably not in our lifetime. So anything else? Josh Fisher, Pat Beckham, Emily Towie, Tim Wong.
Nope, not for me.
All right, then to all of you who joined us this evening, thank you very much. Please share this information with your friends and neighbors. It is recorded on YouTube. And thank you for joining us, and good night.
Night.
Take care.